Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. His name is Jeff Banman, and he is a recognized leader in the area of human performance and human behavior in high stress environments. With over 30 years of experience across multiple domains, including the Fire Service, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, and the Central Intelligence Agency. He is also the host of his own podcast, Mindset Radio, and he is currently authoring a book called Anchored Human, which we are definitely going to dive into. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nicole. I really appreciate it.
We're going to have an awesome conversation. We've got a do-over happening today.
The redo
for the audience. Jeff and I did try to record this in July, but we had some big technical difficulties.
My end. Yep.
Really, you know what though? I've got a new phrase for myself that I've been totally really getting my mindset around when it comes to perceiving my reality. And it's it's never rejection. It's always redirection.
Nice.
So we just got redirected to this time of the year because I think you also would probably agree, without divulging much, that it's more appropriate to be doing this right now.
100%. I mean, it's, everything does maneuver. I don't love the statement everything happens for a reason all the time, but it does. I mean, everything does. If you are in flow, in alignment, connected, paying attention, I think things do line up for you. And that, it doesn't always feel like the right thing, but yeah, I think we're right in the right moment.
Yeah, you can't fight it. You just got to be like, okay, this is where it's going. Let's just take the ride.
Surrender and acceptance. Surrender and acceptance.
Exactly.
Oh, what a journey it's been.
Oh, well, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics today, and that is safety. And for my audience, which I don't know if I've actually divulged to them too much, is, I've been I'm working on my own program about intimacy, and I'm working based on the 3 pillars that I feel are what hold intimacy in place. And one of those is safety. And we're going to talk a lot about safety today because you are quite the expert in safety.
Yeah. Now in many ways. Right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this. Okay. What does safety mean to you today?
Yeah. I mean, I think, this has been an interesting evolution, right? Because I've clearly lived my life in the world of physical safety, right? Protecting those around me, understanding that. And I think when we hear the word safe, that's right where we go. I mean, that's a very primal, okay, am I safe, right? Am I safe here? Do I feel safe with this person? And it's something we often speak about. And for years, I have said, listen, it's the only question that truly matters to any living being, right? And it's like the buzz in the body. It's the filtering every single day. Am I safe? Am I not? Am I safe? Am I not? Like that's the stuff going on in the background constantly. And, I fundamentally believe now, being able to have grown into a new space and look at things, that safety shows up for us in a number of ways. And probably all of us have a very, let me say, disrupted anchor of safety. Like that sensation that occurs in the body when you feel safe is generally more familiar than it is good, bad, right, wrong, or whatever, right? The body doesn't know the difference, good or bad, healthy or not healthy, or whatever it might be. It feels comfortable. It feels familiar. It feels safe. And
which it
go ahead.
usually actually isn't safe.
No, usually it's because we could, because if you, and this is what we'll talk about today, right? This is the exploration back into kind of precognitive development when we are nothing but a sensing being, when we don't have that mental capacity to understand things. What are the energies and the sensations that are being created and lodged in our system over time that are comfortable, right? If mom or dad is a high anxiety person, child is absorbing that constantly. And because it's mom or because it's dad, that feels safe now, right? That feels comfortable. And then as we grow, we begin to define that as a safe feeling. And so, of course, we attract people and connect with people that bring that sensation to the body. And we go, oh, I feel safe around this person. No, you're about to wreak havoc on yourself, right? And so, and listen, millions of years ago, am I safe to leave the cave? That was the question. Am I safe to go get food? Am I safe to hunt? Am I safe to do these things? Very physically driven. But as we've matured as human beings, as we've evolved, while we may be technically more physically safe today, and I'm not even sure we are than we were millions of years ago, now it's like, am I safe to say this, be this, do this, share this, speak this, connect, be open, be vulnerable. Like there is like the mound of things that are now registering in that core kind of human process. It creates such a level of confusion and disconnection in the system. You don't know which way to turn anymore. And I think that's what, as we begin to unpack that, that's what it means to me.
Well, and I love how you brought up the example of like mom or dad is like this. And so this is my safety, because as you're writing the book, The Anchored Human, as a child, your anchor of safety, your first anchor of safety is your parents.
Yeah, 100%.
And so
100%.
anything that your parents do, whether it actually is safe or not, you take on and perceive as safety.
Yeah. Yeah. As real, as comfortable, as familiar. I mean, it's like I like to say, roller coaster or cliff, same physiological response, body doesn't know the difference, right? There has to be calculation. And early in childhood development, we don't have the tools to sense in, feel that, regulate, and then actually compare that to some logic or capability, right? And so by the time that comes about, we've kind of been issued our feelings, if you will. And we can talk about, my position on emotional labeling or in early childhood development here in a little bit. I mean, but honestly, this is what I've come to in life, right? If there's, out of everything I've done, I believe it's led me down this path. There's one impact I can make and leave behind in this world. It is going to be kind of restructuring the earliest moment of life and creating a space where child could come into this world, learn quickly with parents how to down-regulate, how to disperse energy, how to find safe. Because in my work and in my path, I spoke about it for years. Hey, there's this thing called, what does safe feel like? I don't know yet, right? And so I just kind of fundamentally have this belief that safe, registering safe in the system, is a place where there is no need, no external push of energy, no need for connection, no need to like anchor into any other person, just at rest and nothing coming in. And you're just literally at zero. So part of the kind of long-term anchored human process is finding zero. It's about being able to reset that central nervous system from that kind of bottom line buzz that everything gets built on over time. And then we're confused. And so to me, safe, actual, like if I take all the emotion out of it and take all the connection out of it, safe is a 0 point in the body, nothing in, nothing out, body just working, blood flowing, air exchange, electricity, like that's it. And you can find this place of just absolute, I'm gonna call it peace. It's like this
neutrality.
It's settledness. It's a settledness like you've never experienced before. And when I got there, my whole system reset. I mean, everything, that final buzz, that final point of, oh, this is it. This is what everything's built on, that felt so good and safe and familiar, gone.
Yeah.
And now it's like, now being able to bring energy in and, disperse it and let it flow. It's been crazy.
It's interesting to discover that state when all your life you thought you knew what safety was.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a time when I was doing my Vipassana, the 10-day silent meditation retreat, where I discovered what felt like to me as a state of contentment. It wasn't bliss. It wasn't, it was just, I was so content. And recognizing and discovering this state for the first time really opened my awareness to the fact that I had no idea that this was even possible.
Yeah.
And what it actually did for my whole nervous system.
What just happened? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, wow. And I love that, you're working to, like you said, if there's one thing you can leave behind in this world, it is to make an impact on the earliest stages of development of children, which one of my big core works is the inner child. I think it's so important to be doing that work. We have the most of the population has no idea how important those first 7 years are in our own development and who we are going to become. It's literally our blueprint for our adult life in so many ways, until we actually want to go back and change it.
Yes, it is.
I know. So I really appreciate your work, and I'm really excited for my audience to learn more from you. When it comes to safety and your development of your understanding of safety started in high stress environments.
Yeah.
Let my audience know what it was like for you in really understanding how the nervous system reacts and how to train someone to really anchor into their own safety.
Yeah. I mean, I think, of course, now looking back, right, I was kind of always leaning this way. I mean, even growing up at the fire station at 16 years old, riding fire trucks, going into my first house fire at 16, clearly hyper exposed to extremely high stress environments at a very young age. And for some reason felt very comfortable in that space. It's later understand, like, how do you learn to control chaos? Right. Yeah. Thank you, childhood. And, that just progressed over time, but I always had this very unique look at, why do we have to do it this way? What's a different way we can approach this? How do we engage the system more effectively? I developed my first full-scale exercise at 17, had this idea that, hey, we could do things a little bit different, get people more kind of hyped up, as I would say back then, right? More kind of in the idea that I'm not just training drills, that I'm actually in an evolution. And, that progressed over time, and then really had a very unique opportunity in my time with the government to reevaluate methodologies of training, less kind of task-based, do this, more behavioral based. Okay, how is this person with this skill set then going to show up in a particular moment in time? And then how is their effectiveness? And then that, exploded into, working across the special operations community, really in kind of the scenario development world. Had a chance early on to do some very deep dive work into heart rate variability. I mean, that was I needed a tool I could use in the field. And, I didn't have this lab. We had to see, okay, like in action, what's happening externally and internally. And so, really started to break down calculations to understand, very small shifts to physical, mental, and emotional load on the system, right? Things coming at us, how we navigated that. And then, where did that diminish performance? Where did that diminish, like, the results we were trying to produce? And so it was a playground for years. I mean, wide open budgets, access to some of the most brilliant people that were out there. HRV wasn't a thing. Heart rate variability wasn't even really in the conversation at that point in time. And so it was a very unique time to look and dissect and dive into the human in a way, most people don't get to do. And, being able to pull live readings out of people in real operational environments and, on the stock exchange floor and CEOs of publicly traded companies and just pro athletes and like really do this massive comparison, we just found, it just solidified this idea of how blank the internal system is, like without registering or logic or education, like the inside, it just doesn't know good bad, right? It doesn't know right wrong. It doesn't know, there's not that judgment going on in the body itself. And so to be able to map human beings and really understand, hey, wait a minute, this was more severe for you than it was for me. You know what I mean? Like, you can go to the extreme. Like if you were crawling into a house fire and I was crawling into a house fire, you'd probably be a lot more freaked out than I would be.
Yeah. Does it come to the body's recognition of familiar versus unfamiliar?
I think it does 100%, right? The more familiar, and this is why now applying certain techniques with a known, right? As we do inner child work, as we go back to our childhood, as we begin to become aware of a variety of things over time, we begin to then sense into what's taking place. Just a variety of things come up for us. So basically, when we look at this model, right, when we begin to look at familiar versus unfamiliar, and the gateway that we've got now, all the great work in emotional intelligence, in inner child work, in understanding impact, early childhood impact, even small things, right? I mean, you could.
So are you saying, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, go.
Are you saying that inner child work was absolutely part of this study?
Critical, absolutely critical. I mean, it wasn't early on. It started to then come in, as I progressed, right? Because in frames of how this process, I mean, you got to think this is almost 15 plus years, 17 years in the making since I started this. I kind of sat in the model everybody else did. Hey, it's all up here.
Yes.
It's all controlled up here. So if I can fix this, everything else works. Unfortunately, we have to now reverse that, right? That is now, my tagline now is learn to quiet the body and the mind will follow.
Yes.
So now we're in this reversed place of, no, this is just going to be what it's going to be. Like, this is like, let's start using our brain for what it's there for, to be able to kind of analyze, look, assess, apply logic, apply good reasoning. But signature wise, it's all inner child work. You need to approach it and go, wait a minute, that's all nose down work.
Yeah.
That is, you had no knowledge of what even anger meant, what fear meant, what happiness meant. They're just concepts, right? They're just theory at that point. You're a sensing, feeling being, processing everything into the system. And so
was this part of the funding that you got when you were working for the government, or was this
not the inner child work? It started to come in later, right?
Okay.
Because I started to then go to other programs and started to look, because I'm seeing, okay, why is, little, like, became curious. Why do certain things affect certain people some ways and not other people others? Mm-hmm. Why is that so severe for someone and somebody else actually like gets comfortable in that space, right? And so as I begin to kind of dive in, and now I've got the body data, the actual system data running behind the show, now I can begin to look deeper and then of course, like me, I'm always, well, why? I'm the curious pain in the butt kind of guy that's like, well, why is it doing that? That's interesting. There was no real commonality across the board with everyone. And so what were their experiences? And as you go back and you go back a little more, and you go back a little more, and you go back a little more, ultimately you're going to end up in childhood. And so by the time the end of those programs came about, I mean, I remember, had a very solid U.S. Navy SEAL. I mean, solid dude, multiple deployments, good guy. You would look at him and be like, this is the guy you go to war with, struggling in different conditions. And, and then just in conversation, you begin to kind of emerge back to like life growing up and influence or impact of mom and dad. And, oh, wait a minute, this is what's actually running. This is what everything else is now being built on top of. And so how do we begin to clear that so that this actually can flow through in freedom? It's just like this, if you've ever felt like you've just been running your head into a brick wall for days and days and days and days and years and years. And, I feel like I ran mine into the brick wall for 45 years, it's, that's that baseline. So, inner child work and actually beginning to look back in ways. I think part of the struggle for a lot of people is we're still living up here. So we're trying to use logic and reason to understand those moments. Right. And 1 to 5, there is no logic reason. It doesn't exist. So I can't apply it looking back, because then I'm trying to look back at myself as I am as an adult and process it that way.
Yeah. A lot of our unconscious patterning has no logic whatsoever to it.
None. Yeah. It's because you didn't have it. When it got developed, you didn't have that capability. So, I now have more memories of childhood now that I've converted out of here to just really leaning into the sensation that was present at a particular moment in time. And then the imagery, which did get captured, starts to come up. And then, you can begin to at least feel into the memory.
Well, I think one of the reasons why is because in our society, in Western societies, our safety is programmed up here. And it is not safe to be in our bodies at all.
No.
When you're looking for information about the inner child, one of the reasons why it's so difficult for people to connect is because going into the body feels absolutely unsafe.
Way unsafe. Way unsafe. Because we're so so part of the Anchored Human program, and this is this has been a little controversial to some people.
No.
You don't say. I wouldn't, one of the fundamental concepts that we're going to roll out, so book and then a line of programming, the anchored leader, the anchored parent, the anchored child, the anchored birth. We're working on, the anchored, I don't know what we're going to call it yet. It'll be a kind of a nonprofit side for veterans, police, fire, military, etc., active duty military. I'm also working with Charlie Engel, who just celebrated his 30 years of sobriety. Charlie's the guy that ran across the Sahara Desert years ago. Matt Damon funded him to raise a bunch of water.
Ooh, the anchored service agent.
Yeah, and then the anchored addict, and really looking at the pathway, right? At a pathway to begin it, to move somebody into that space where I can then start to touch sensation, because you got to do that in a safe context, right? You got to make it safe. And we have the reason why somebody said the other day, they're like, oh, from the untethered soul to the anchored human. I like that. As human beings, if we do not have a sensation-based experience of something in adulthood, that logical brain goes, it's of no value. Goodbye.
So hence why we actually don't choose the things that are good for us.
Yep.
Oh, we don't have
a
value.
There's no anchor
point. I love that. That makes so much sense.
Yeah. There's nothing to work towards. There's nothing to go back to. I have it's flying blind. It's literally like you are wandering the desert. Maybe one day you'll find something. And the problem is then that triggers one of the very core things for humans. One of the 4 primary things that cause the greatest stress and greatest disruption to a human being is uncertainty. So if I don't have an anchor, if I don't have a nesting or a sensation that I at least experienced in some way, shape, or form, no matter, it doesn't have to be like this massive experience. You don't have to have the whole thing. But if we can dose you over time to start to register that and re-anchor, it's like the big change was, Buddha's, hey, we're nothing but an Indian elephant in body with a bunch of monkeys on top trying to control us, right? That was that was a concept that landed for me in a way that just registered it all, just brought it all in together. I was like, oh yes. So now you come into my house, there's elephants everywhere. It's a reminder to be here and not there. Um, but as you begin to experience kind of these micro moments of re-anchoring the elephant wants what's familiar, doesn't know good or bad, doesn't know right or wrong. It just wants what's familiar. That's why, you want to go to the gym, you go for a couple of days or maybe a few weeks, and eventually you're back on the couch because you haven't really given the attention to re-anchoring the system to a new point of something familiar. And that's what it's about. So like incremental changes, incremental movements to kind of begin to re-anchor that so that the body registers and it begins to know what it's looking for. Once you've given it that, then you start to apply the logic and reasoning and understanding and the insights that you get along the way, exploring inner child work, exploring self-development, exploring these things. And those things now get systematically sensation registered in the body. But I think the kind of point of contention that I've had a few people like literally be like, I don't know about that. So one of the things is to literally for a period in time, remove all emotional labeling. Because if you look at childhood, if you look at the way you grew up, my guess is if you're truly able to look back, we weren't able to express, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. That wasn't in the cards. We were expressing whatever the sensation was in the body in some way, shape, or form that was then driven by conditions. And that's one of the things, like I can remember as a child being labeled as angry or frustrated or whatever. I couldn't watch the Hulk anymore or any of that stuff, but if I could have expressed myself, I'd have been like, no, I'm terrified. No, I'm sad. With like little man now, who's about to turn 5 for years, if he's kind of on it a little bit, I look at him and go, hey, bud, it looks like you got some tension in the system. You want to go wrestle? You want to go ride your bike? You want to go run around? And he got to the point where he looked at me and be like, sometimes he'd go, no, I just want cuddle. Oh, bud, you're just not feeling safe right now. You're needing an external source to kind of help regulate you. Cool, man. Let's go sit.
Do you think that is common among boys and men, where that oftentimes the tension could be from a result of not feeling safe?
100%. I think if most men could be truly honest about, if they could connect to what's actually below either the labeling or the things that were created. I mean, I will be very authentic for years, partners, and I've been through it and have not always done well. Why are you so angry? Why are you upset? I'm not angry. I was, but that was the expression. That was the incorrect expression of what was really there. I was deeply sad. I was deeply hurt. I was deeply wounded. And just that was the expression, right? Because that was the expression dad had. That was the expression that the men around me would show. And so that was what you begin to register as familiar. And it's not that, it's sadness, it's wounding, it's, an incompleteness. It's a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a, I don't know. It'll come back to me, but
it makes a lot of sense when I think about how, unavailable physical affection was for most men, at least growing up in the era that I grew up, and I'm sure even still today to some degree. It's like, as a girl, you would be held, if something went wrong, but as a guy or a boy, you were told, like, get over it, like
suck it up, deal with it. I mean, that my whole life, my whole environment was, deal with that. You need to suck that up. You need to, and part of that comes in this transition of like, what are our roles and responsibilities? And, it's funny. Declan's mom, my ex-wife, years ago bought me these 2 prints, and one says, I will keep you safe. And the other says, I will keep you wild. And, it was interesting when I saw those, like my first registering was yes, and like, and her context at the time was, you do this and I'll do that. And I've kept them, and they're still up, because it's a reminder to myself every day that in partnership, it's a yes and. Like, even as the man that I am, right, that I've done plenty of stupid stuff around the world, plenty of manly things. I need a partner that can keep me safe. I need a partner that I can fall down around. I need a partner that can hold me up, that can be a launch pad for me. And having really, and that took a lot of work, right? I can't do it all the time. And I spent my life, and I think a lot of men spend their lives trying to do it all, trying to create the conditions that you're physically safe, that you're emotionally safe, and for men over time, as we've grown as human beings, I feel like where men struggle most is it's another thing to do. It's a task. It's not a behavior. Our brains go, oh, that's a task. I need to, provide this space for my spouse. I need to X, Y, and Z. I need to, and it's more task-based driven than it is like core centered body responsibility. I say, and I'll let you jump in here for a second, but part of this evolution was, like, when I would walk into the house, until little man came around, all women, right? Daughters, wife, ex-wife, mom, sister, like all women. And I couldn't walk in the door and be dysregulated. If I walked in the door and dysregulated, ran like wildfire. Everybody's in there fluttering. What can I do? They're trying to like balance off my energy. And then there's just this gnarly energy exchange. And then everybody's elevated and it doesn't work. And when I sat back to begin to understand, wait a minute, and everybody is, but just internally for me, it was like, wait, I am the central nervous system of this group, of this family. So if I'm dysregulated, it's going to flood out. Same thing in the company. If I'm dysregulated as a leader, it's going to flow out. Everyone is going to be dysregulated around me. It's not a task. It's a beautiful responsibility that if I can regulate my energy and my system and my central nervous system, I can have a deep unspoken impact on everyone around me, and bring that settledness, and others will feel it. And then their central nervous system starts to regulate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really interesting what you're talking about, because when I think about the masculine feminine relationship and how important it is for a man to truly step into his masculine energy of, being that protective leader, director,
Yep.
like you said, regulating your energy so that you are the grounding like post for the children, for the feminine, in your life, that a woman needs that in order to feel safe.
Yes.
But then on the flip side, what I'm starting to recognize too, and just kind of understanding and observing men, is that a man starts to feel really safe when a woman is able to nurture and be soft and tender and attentive to let's call them the finer details that a man really doesn't have time to think about, but they're there. And through that kind of idea of how partners can provide safety for one another, because we all need to feel safe. In general, we think, the man's duty is to create safety, but
stability, right? All of that. Yeah.
However, as the feminine, we also have our masculine energy within us
100%.
But it operates from a feminine point of view. So the feminine energy, I love it, because I've noticed that men tend to feel safer when I approach with a more soft, emotional driven attentiveness.
Okay.
Where I'm not so much like asking questions, but I'm more about providing emotional support in a way that just is listening and knowing that there's a tenderness that if you need to open up, you're going to be received.
Yes. It is it's always a curious space. That's the beautiful thing about partnership. It's gonna bring it all up, and to navigate those roads, and I think there's common ground there, but then again, everybody's a little bit unique, and so exploring the foundations and then applying the uniqueness of the individual and then the partnership, right, in kind of an orderly format there, allows the two of you to create a very nested balance of regulation, of, deregulation, of allowing things to flow through. Yeah, I mean, it is a wildly curious space that I don't think anybody has truly mastered yet. I mean, that's the fun thing about it. It's like, it's all curiosity and exploration. It's all playful. And I think for me, that even has been a big transition to everything I do now. Part of the struggle in the self-development world over 15 years or so, it still feels very kind of shame, guilt driven in a way. And I think that, or if we track back to earlier, that's what I was talking about. I think most men have a deep sense of shame and guilt, built on a level of obligation or expectation that got created very early, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the bottom buzz for
Yeah.
most of us, not all, but most of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're driven by. So if our partner or whatever comes in and kind of, generally speaking, if they're expressing themselves, the filter that is being heard through that is, I'm did something wrong, did something bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's that bad dog syndrome that I think a lot of men have been anchored with, and you can resist that until it shows up and you go, oh, right. I mean, you've got the rest of your life to decide whether or not that's what's there, or some version thereof that is definitely the piece in play. So it's interesting. It's an interesting playground.
Oh, it is. It truly is. Well, I want to go into the story of your son's birth, because when you and I were talking about this originally, it gave me one of the biggest downloads of understanding why why safety is of the utmost importance in everyone's life right now, and why we choose safety over love every single time.
Yeah.
And so can you share with the audience first what you learned and what what happened during the birth of your son that helped you understand how important those critical moments are, and also continuing that onwards.
Yeah.
But from that moment, how critical the birth is.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this was it's kind of a difficult period in a lot of ways. And, because we had planned a very nurtured birthing experience, done all the work and the coursework and the planning, and, everything was set to align that way. And unfortunately, it just didn't go that way for, a number of reasons, and who knows why. But ultimately, we ended up in emergency C-section, which then brought about its own fears and worries and stresses and disconnection and all kinds of things, and disappointment, and just, the flood of things going on. And so, C-section to birth. And, we were sitting there with Declan, him on mom, and having our moment. And then literally, she just kind of said, hey, I don't feel well. And out of nowhere, the anesthesiologist pushed something. Like, didn't say anything, didn't ask anybody anything, just pushed something. And, excuse me, and she was out for about 3 or 4 hours. And, I don't know if doctor didn't say anything like, I didn't know what was going on. I'm kind of like, what the F did you just do to my wife? And so there I am with little man, you know what I mean? And in the next 3 or 4 hours, skin to skin, shirt off, went back to everything we had learned to that point, and then everything I knew, and just sat in my regulated breathing pattern, my pattern that I know works and produces, send signals of safety to the brain, starts to dissipate, all the energy in the room and in the body and in others around me. And literally just did that for 3 or 4 hours until, mom woke up. And, I think in that space, it was not but it was a contributing factor to what I watch him now, how he regulates so quickly and how he connected he is and how comfortable he is in some uncomfortable spaces as a child, right? I mean, you can see him able to sit in things that maybe other kids don't. And I like to think that was a part of it. I think there were many other factors, the way his mom is, and, she's same thing as she starts to come around, right? She's able to sit and provide that same kind of nurturing anchor of safety. Hey, I'm here now, like, and that settledness that occurs, rather than moments of anxiety or, even gratitude is a big energy, right? I mean, you got to think, child comes from womb state, zero state, right? They're able to like allow energy to come in. They're wrapped in a physically safe environment. All their needs are met. There are no external needs for them at that point in time. It is zero. It is the essence of safe. And then, I think we've maybe done a little bit of disservice in labeling birth as traumatic. It's just a high energy period, right? There's a lot that goes on. Babies transitioning from utter safety to now world, and absorbing everyone's energy in the environment, right? So what's the nurse like? What's the doctor like? What is everybody like in that moment? That's all being fed right into a raw nerve. And, that's why there is critical importance of mom and dad's, maneuvering early on to like, if they are more regulated, they understand that breath, that system, and they are literally now bringing baby back in, and baby's going, oh, okay, my mom and dad are teaching me how to be safe right now. And that is dispersing this wild energy I just experienced, allowing it to leave the system gently over time. And now I'm able to return myself. I mean, I think that's what's going on in utero as far as the baby is concerned. But then externally, that to me is one of the missing links, right?
Yes.
That early moment,
yes,
where baby needs to be able to transition from what it knew, and that point of familiar is so close right there, right? When we talked about having that point of familiar is so close right then and there, that if you don't capture it within the first hours, right, it starts to get distance because there's no capability for holding it.
Yes.
And so it either you continue it or it becomes everything new.
Yes. And I think, so this is, and I love this, and I'm so glad that we met and I was able to hear this story, because it provided such a strong foundation for some of the work that I'm going to be creating through my method of understanding. Like when you told me that, like instantly the download was, of course, when we think about our anchor of safety, the child in the womb, like you said, it's the most nurturing, safest environment a baby could ever envision.
Yeah.
Everything is taken care of. You don't have to ask for it. It's just all there. It's warm, it's cozy, it's like everything.
Yeah.
And as soon as you're born, you have your umbilical cord, which was literally your anchor of safety, which in our Western society and civilization, the first thing one of the doctors do is cut the thing off. And so instantly your anchor of safety is completely severed before you even have an opportunity to find your true anchor of safety in this world. And so for me, it's like kind of going back into that understanding of realizing it's so traumatic and disruptive to the baby's experience to do that. And why there are civilizations in our world, in like other countries, in like especially in the continent of Africa and even in South America, where they will leave the placenta and the umbilical cord intact for, and sometimes they'll do washing of it for like several days. But at the very least, like you said, for those first few hours, if you can leave everything intact and just have that baby finally discover its own anchor of safety first with both mom and dad, okay, or whoever the parents are, and then let that establish before you disrupt the original cord of safety.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, I think when you combine all of those pieces, right? Because you're going to think, I mean, you're now going from, you're in the biggest transition of your life, period. That like it is from womb to world.
Yeah.
It's
doesn't get bigger than that.
No. Absolutely. And, and I think it's become very procedural. And in that procedural space, even in the coldness of it, like even in the, nurse takes baby to the table, blah, 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 shots this, that, got to do this, got to do that, very procedural. Hey, just give it a minute. This has happened for a very long time. We're going to be okay. Let's look at the most important thing right now. And the most important thing right now is transition from here to there, from there to here.
Mm-hmm.
And that re-establishment of zero, of safe, right? Mm-hmm. And that's and then we can begin to build the proper anchors of what we now refer to as safe, right? And it's like, I want to be around somebody that lets me settle. That feels safe to me, lets me bring my system down. If I walk in the house and there's instant need, you know what I mean? And there's instant pull and there's more to do, radically unsafe. No, thanks. I'm out, bye. Sorry. But leaning in, but I was trained that when you show up, okay, now it's more to do. Now what else, what's next on the list of things to do? And then it just becomes exhausting. And then I'm depleted, in my Instagram posts, and you've seen it, right? I mean, I love to kind of reframe or recontextualize things and look at things very deeply. And so each of my posts is a word. And I will kind of pick a word that feels relevant or comes up from reading or whatever's going on in life. And then go research the deep dive definition and origin and all that stuff. And then kind of frame that in there and then kind of add my own personal value to it. But a couple of weeks ago or so, I was really looking at the word depleted.
I remember seeing that post.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the cool thing is you get into the word depleted. This is what we miss logically. Like one of the definitions of depleted is essential for growth. And I was like, oh, right. I mean, as an adult, like, unfortunately, we have to hit that point of depletion, just all energy sucked, just total overwhelm, as we may call it. I think we call overwhelm depletion. I think we misassociate things often, right? That's why Mindset Radio is about upstairs. Anchored Human is all downstairs, right? Yeah. So how do I reframe or redefine or kind of reassociate things? And that took me a while. I said, hey, I'm just exhausted. Hey, I'm just exhausted. No, I wasn't exhausted. I was fully depleted. And when I was fully depleted, that's where things really started to move. And so, it is interesting when we begin to look at those things.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about it, even just from a physical exercise standpoint, when if you're training and you're lifting weights, like you're always meant to go to the last thing you can possibly do. Like you don't stop when you still have more to give. If you want growth, muscle growth, you have to go to the very sense of depletion.
Yep. Totally. Every time. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. That's like that to me is what upstairs is great for. Curiosity, exploration. I mapped, I think you and I talked about this years ago. I'm like, why do things like Tony Robbins and Landmark, like what's going on there? Why do they seem to work? But then why do I have to keep going back to it? Right. And so being the geek that I am, I started to kind of pull back the curtain, started to uncover some things and really began to learn there's kind of 6 stages to transformation, right? Because that's the big thing, right? I don't want to just change. I want to become something new. I want to transform into kind of this new person. And, first we all have to have a catalyst. We all have to have some kind of driver for change or for some desire to move. And it comes about usually in some significant point, divorce, arguments, fights, heart attack, whatever it might be, right? There's some catalyst that occurs. And when that catalyst occurs, what do? We start to go look. Well, what book am I going to read? What program am I going to go take? What should I do? And so we have this because of the way our systems work, we have this really embedded craving for information. And so we go out to learn something, and learning something either looks like maybe new information that we didn't have in our, capacity before, or oftentimes it's hearing things newly, right? Because as we grow and as we age and as we have various experiences, we have a new context for how we see or view things or how we hear things. And so when we do that, when that occurs, the system goes, wait a minute, still upstairs. Wait a minute. I need to look at this. And my awareness broadens out, right? And I begin to open myself up. And as my awareness broadens out, here's the magic. This is the transition. And I think people miss this. Once my awareness broadens out and I'm starting to look kind of more holistically at everything, I get moments of insight. And insight is the actual transmission from kind of knowledge or things upstairs into the body. Because everyone's had a moment of insight, and insight shows up like, oh, you know what I mean? Like the whole gamut. Doesn't matter, but you feel insight, right? And then with that insight, what happens is you now have access to a new behavior, a new way of doing things, right? All kinds of things. With that moment of insight, it opens up access for change or transformation. And then you go out and take action, right? And that's the process. Unfortunately, in my personal opinion, the way a lot of things in the kind of self-help world have been designed is to keep you in that kind of top loop, and we become insight junkies because insight feels really good. We're able to dip into new action, but then that doesn't hold for any period of time.
Well, I was going to say, before you go any further, while you were talking, I realized, depletion is a state of not feeling safe.
Yeah.
There's nothing
100%.
safe about completely being depleted.
Nope. You are out of all capacity.
So of course you're going to avoid it.
Yep. Totally. Right. And so you get into these spaces where if you're involved in things, you're driven to feel that dump again, that inside dump again. So you go back, take another class, and you kind of hit your insight and you dip into something, but it doesn't hold, and you go back. And I think when we align the full system, when we actually can leverage the mind for what it's there for and register it into the body, what we're learning to do in that method is actually able to hold access, right? That's kind of the gateway. Like, how much access can I hold open? And so more likely now I'm in kind of the bottom third loop. I'm able to gain insight from the actions I'm taking, which builds more access, which lets me take new actions. And so it becomes more self-driven than, program-driven.
I'm fucking loving this conversation because you know what? Like, I'm realizing so much right now. I am someone who likes to work till I'm in depletion. And I thought that was a weakness. Like, I thought that was something like, wow, Nicole, you need to manage and find a balance in some way. Now, there is a balance to that.
You don't want to be depleted all the time.
No, you don't want to be depleted all the time.
Yep.
But I don't operate at my best potential if I'm coasting in this, like, really, like, I don't even know what to call that zone, but it's the coasting zone. I don't do well in that zone. I do well when I just give her and I just go and I work and do whatever it is. I feel like I'm in my most creative element when I'm doing that. And then, like, all of a sudden I need to take a few days off and I need to replenish and give back to myself. But I find that cycle works really well for me. And so hearing this from you, I'm now like, oh, okay, depletion is actually not a bad thing. It allows for growth.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and that's where, I have had to learn how introverted I actually am. I am your classic introverted extrovert. If I go out and do, things, speak, teach, whatever, give, push, there's an end point to that. And if I push through too far on that now, then I am depleted and I have to take this whole rejuvenation cycle. I mean, I think what I have found is like flow is going to be the place between full depletion and kind of full performance, right? So it's kind of this longer term place where I can feel myself dipping, like, the delivery starting to kind of sink a little bit. I'm not at peak. I'm not at prime. What do I need? And, for 40, probably, let's just call it 40 years of my life from age 7 forward, right? Now almost 48 coming up. I didn't even know how to give myself a moment, and that's learned behavior. It was just go full on, and no escape, no time for me, no time to rest, no time to resource myself. And ultimately, depletion And if we push ourselves like that, the problem with depleting, like, it's a fine line, because
Yes.
pushing ourselves that way, then depletion becomes a real negative. Then I have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
And that's where the emotional connection falls. Like, you start to shut down.
Yeah.
And, I can't be available to people. I'm just confined in so many ways. And so now the gauge is like, how do I find that flow to the appropriate kind of, everything in my world is scalable, right? Everything I would like. Depletion isn't a finite defined place.
Mm-hmm.
There's a range, or any of that. And
well,
and you're like right, because the further I go, the more I begin to see and understand as well.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, it's like when you're training for anything, your endurance levels will be stronger. Your how much weight you can push will be stronger. Like all of that gets scaled.
Yes.
So you can do things at much grander levels than before. So I love this because it totally shifts everything for me and my whole perception, because I really struggled with this concept of, wow, like, I know how important it is to have balance. I don't deny that balance isn't important. It's absolutely essential. You have
but again, who can register what balance feels like in their system? Nobody has an anchor for that.
Don't. And everyone's anchor for that is going to be different.
Yep.
Right? There are going to be some people who need to operate more within that coasting, and like their depletion will be, at a different range. Yep. But for me, I've noticed, like, I am at my best work comes when I go to depletion. I find I get the best creativity. Whenever I'm pushing myself or moving, I get that, but I also get it in the rest period. But the rest period has to be so well deserved. It just can't be something I decide in the moment because I don't know, it feels good. Like, it's really kind of got to be part of this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, we're all going to have those. I think the question then is like I would challenge you back. Like, does that cycle work for anyone around you? Does that, like, how do you manage that cycle? Like, I think I've got a perfect, beautifully cycle that I know extremely well if it's just me.
Yeah.
Right. But that cycle may not work in the context of others.
Yes.
And so then it becomes like, just as long as we're paying attention to that and everything around us with that, right? That's where we start to find our flow. But it's such a curious space of exploration. It's such a cool place to begin to see and understand. And if you're attuned to, nose down, if you're attuned to the elephant, the body, the physical sensation without some kind of labeling, so to speak, around it, you now intuitively know, you're building that set of wisdom, where you are. I mean, how great is it when you can communicate to the people around you that say, hey, I'm entering this space and this is what it looks like. I need 24 hours on my own. I need 2 days. I need whatever to reply. I know how to take care of myself now. I know how to rejuvenate myself now. No one can do it for me because no one can do it for anybody else. But to have that anchor and see it coming and be attuned to it, now how powerful is that in the context of relationship, partnership, friendship, whatever it is around you, to be able to communicate really where you are effectively, because you have that point of what that familiarness feels like, and it's coming.
This is so cool, because when you talk about depletion and how without depletion you can't have growth.
Well,
right?
You can just,
so the more depleted,
you don't have to drive yourself there.
Yeah.
Right.
So we talk about like healthy depletion, because there's a good and a bad to everything. And so when you're in that healthy depletion phase where you really pushed yourself a little bit more than you did the last time.
Right.
Okay. Now that's a relative loss, so to speak. But that scaled loss, that growth in loss, then translates into more growth in gains.
Yeah. So I like to refer to it as, and this is, this goes back to the emotional conversation, like, and this is where people kind of go, huh? So you don't have happiness in your body. You don't have anger in your body. You don't have love in your body. Like, it doesn't exist inside. That's a label of a sensation or um, or something going on internally that is being observed externally by yourself or others. And I love to use this love conversation. And I've had this conversation for a while. A good friend of mine runs a podcast. She's a brilliant psych. And I text her one night and I said, hey, what do you think about love as capacity? And, trauma or things are actually wounds of love that limit our capacity. And so this conversation and idea explored. So if we think about it, right, you start a new business, you meet somebody new, you get a new animal, whatever it is, you love it, right? That's the logical explanation of the feelings you have. Well, internally, you just have an enormous amount of capacity for fill in the blank. And over time, as things chip away, the capacity for that thing starts to diminish. Now, how much more effective could we be in relationship with each other, right? In general, like, if we're in partnership and I come and go, I don't love you anymore. Is that really true? Or if I come and go, hey, I don't have any capacity for us anymore right now. Like I need to replenish my capacity for this thing, this relationship, this, thing we've created. That's a wildly different conversation.
Very different.
Wildly different conversation. But because we've equated that feeling to love, that's what we've labeled it. When it goes away, because it will go away or it will shrink or it will diminish over time, period. And then it becomes something else, right? What do I want? I want ultimate capacity for the people around me. And that's going to ebb and flow. And I know it's going to ebb and flow. So if instead of getting into the labeling of things, if I view now, and am I capable? Do I have the capacity to hold space for this person or this thing or this business or whatever it is? Because they're all going to chip away. I don't love my business anymore. I think I'm going to sell it. You're just out of capacity. It's normal. Anything's going to shrink capacity over time. Life's going to show up and going to shrink it. And learning how and the cool thing about it is you can replenish your capacity. You can find new views. You can find new things. And if you can't, then it's a different conversation. It's like, listen, this, whatever the context of this is, maybe it's my business. Like I can't get the capacity back from my business. And then I'm able to look at it and go, oh, well, why? Because it was unhealthy, because the business does the things that eat away at my core. That's not right. Or the relationship or whatever it is. And so to me, it's a beautifully, radically different conversation to have. And it's just a game changer in my view.
It is a complete game changer. And I think that's why you hear people who have been in relationship for long periods of time, like I'm talking decades and decades, which is really rare in our world right now. But those who've been like really spent a lifetime with their partner, their definition of love evolves over time because likely what you said, they've been depleted of the original feeling that they thought was love. And now they've replenished it and it's become something else. Like
something else. Yeah. They've built a new capacity in a new way. Right. And so we know capacity is going to ebb and flow, right? We know capacity is going to do that. And so being able to re-anchor to a new sense of capacity in the long term lets me look at life radically different. Like, oh, I'm just like that diminished. Can I get that back? I don't know. Is there a new sense of capacity? Like it's just a different conversation. I don't know if it's the right conversation.
I think it is absolutely necessary. Listen, whether it's right or it's wrong, it's necessary.
Yeah.
And I think that, without that conversation, you can't fully determine if the relationship truly isn't right for you anymore, or if this is truly about perhaps a misperception of a labeling of a feeling you had that you believe is gone and you equated to loving your partner. And now it's like, oh no, I now have to replenish myself because I've been depleted. And once I'm replenished, actually it transforms into an even better feeling for my partner.
Absolutely.
And so it could be either
I think
or.
that's the unknown. That's the space that is the playground for people, right? And listen, there's a lot of times I should have walked away or my partner should have walked, whatever, right? Because it's like we are depleting each, like who I am, who they are, even in the best case, we're depleting each other's capacity. That's not going to work, right? Then that becomes an unhealthy relationship, period. But I think when we can step away from kind of, it's almost like the generic prescription, that's been issued to us since childhood. This is love. This is the way this looks like. This is what you do. This is blah, blah, blah. Here's your expectations handed on you. I mean, I saw that post the other day that was like, expectations are just premeditated judgments or something or whatever. It's just like, oh, right.
Okay.
It just reframe it.
Speaking of that, I had a revelation about expectations the other day in the shower. Okay.
Love the shower thoughts.
Well, it's water. It totally. Just,
Yep.
like water completely opens my intuition. It just, everything downloads easy. So I realized that I was having an expectation of someone that completely threw me because I didn't have that expectation up until this point. Everything was totally fine. And all of a sudden this expectation came in out of nowhere. And I was like, okay, why did I just have an expectation when I was totally okay with the flow of everything up until that moment? And I realized that my expectation came in because I felt threatened. And I was like, oh, so I'm not safe. Why? What is the threat? And the threat was, I'm not good enough. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so what I did was I realized because I lacked good boundaries as a child, which most of us, had really poor boundaries.
Right. Right. What are those again?
I know. Right. So I had a sense of entitlement that I deserved something that really wasn't mine to ask for in the first place. And so hence the expectation comes in, which was a mask to avoid understanding an insecurity of mine had just been triggered.
Yep.
How amazing is that around expectation?
Yep.
And it all comes back to safety. It always comes back to safety.
I mean, listen, if we just think, and that's what I said for years, like that's the only question that matters. That is what every single thing is built on top of, period. And, we can go looking for, and we have spent, how many decades now looking for the answer to things. If we just start going, something gets triggered, I feel insecure, I feel unstable. The four things I tend to put out, and have created into the experience, right? Uncertainty, fear, trust, and, freedom is what I create in the exercise or in the event of things, but really it's like confinement or constraint. Like those four things, uncertainty, fear, trust, constraint. If we look at our lives, I almost promise you, one of those four, if not multiples of those, are at the core of almost everything. And those are the things that trigger the physical sensation in the body to say, I am not safe, period, every single time. And when that valve flips over, everything wreaks havoc because your body is now moving chemicals, moving things. Your body is designed to keep you alive and functioning, period. I often say, like, I've now come to the place where I have learned to separate myself, and so I put myself into kind of three layers, which is, the soul self, Jeff, right? The universal Jeff, the energy that I believe moves lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. Then there is the human self, ego that exists. And then there's just the meat sack, right? This is just the thing those two are trying to occupy. And I've let fight over with over for control, the meat sack, right? That's all it is, right? Just take everything else outside, like actually be the observer, remove all of that from the physicalness. What does this meat sack needs? Blood, air, electricity, water. That's it, very limited. And the body's going to do certain things. It's going to give me a certain chemical reaction, which will create certain sensations, which then my ego will interpret as X, because X is what I've learned over time from somebody else, not my own discovery, but some construct. I mean, look at when most of our words were defined. You want that man, because I promise you it was a man defining that label for you and connected to your sensation. Sorry, not my game, right? I don't want some dude, thousands of years ago that defined a word in this or that context to now be the driver for what it is. I mean, we got into this beautiful humility was another word I put up the other day, right? Because in context, that means to lower yourself or to be lower, to be humble, to be, lower, but you've got to dive into the variations of that word and the variations that goes around. I mean, in normal, like, go Google, don't look at anything else, just Google humility or humble and look at the first definitions that come up, and then ask yourself, do I want to be humble? I promise you the answer is going to be no, I don't. For most people, like, it's just going to be no, that doesn't correlate to how I view what humble or humility should show up to be. Yet it's a critical component of growth and, openness to excel in life. And so, but you got to get under the layers of it. So this whole freaking internal conflict that's been created is, sorry, now you got me off on a tangent.
Well, no, and I think here, like, even just if you were to take the word humility or humble, and you said it's like to lower oneself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think about the word depletion, which is lowered reserves, right?
Yep.
What stimulates growth is that. And so when we humble ourselves, that's when we're learning. We're actually in a state where we can learn more. So it totally makes sense, but without context. Yeah. You would never want to be humble.
Right. Without really looking at it and being active in the choice and active in the substance, right, that's there. And unfortunately, most people just kind of cruise through life and they are regurgitating what they've been given. And so, that's why, to me, that's generational trauma. It's just the regurgitation of the sensations that got nested in childhood. That's it, right? I mean, we repeat those behavior patterns because they are familiar behavior patterns. It is what you're supposed to do. It's what you've learned and observed and integrated into your central nervous system. And then you're in therapy for the next 30 years trying to figure out why. And so I think there are some ways today we can approach some things that bring about resolution, that put mind and body in flow, that then allow us to kind of bounce these two back and forth in a very healthy way to, kind of unlock these things that are lodged in our body.
When we think about how important safety is, it is literally the crux of everything. I mean, even if you look at relationships, we will literally sacrifice love for safety. It is done over and over, whether it's you're looking at someone you care about, or like an actual intimate relationship, whether it's your purpose, like maybe there's a job or something that you want to do with your life that you absolutely love but totally not safe, so you'll stay in the job that's secure and provides you finance. We will always choose safety at by sacrificing love. Almost always gets sacrificed. And so
because it doesn't really fundamentally exist in some ways. You know what I mean? Like, that's, the body doesn't know love.
Well, not only that, but it just goes to show you how important safety is to our to our ability to even just operate in this life, So if we don't feel safe, we can't have the capacity to love. So hence why it's so important for us to really understand, what does safety truly mean to me? Where is my distorted version of safety anchoring into? What are the toxic traits and behaviors that are exhibited through that anchor of safety? And how do I pull that anchor back and then really anchor into something that is truly safe for me? So would you please share with my audience, what is one of the best ways anyone can start to rediscover that true anchor of safety for themselves? Like, what are some of the techniques, or one technique that you would totally suggest that someone use to start that process?
I mean, the core thing, I mean, and this is where my new word is complexify. I feel like we have complexified, growth, right, over time. For years, clients that came to me, literally, it was hilarious. And every single client that came to me, all top performing people, all, people, big name people in some ways, they would come to me and first question was, "You're not going to make me meditate, are you?" And I was like, well, not like you think. I mean, I think that's a good example of where we have quote unquote complexified the thing, right? But at the end of the day, and it's to me some of the most simple movements. Mindfulness practice, breath work, these things that are now even, oh, I've got to be like Wim Hof. Oh, I got to do all these things. Oh, I got to let's just, whenever I work with anybody, I spend the first 2 weeks doing nothing but breathing. And, it is a breathwork pattern that I believe, and in research, and we look at everything, is what I call the return to original breath, right? So we have to re-anchor the system first. We have to return to the breath that puts us in a place of being a sensing being, not a logical being. And it's a pretty simple process, right? It's just simply, I tell people 4 count-ish, right? I mean, because you got to find how your body works. But it's a 4 count in through the nose, all the way down deep into the diaphragm. I often tell people it's like the sensation should be taking your belly button and turning it towards the floor, really engaging that diaphragm. And that can take a week in of itself just to go, right? Because the idea and the concept is, if you look at most children, this is how they breathe. And, about age 6, 7, we start to show up on the playground, brain starting to, fire on cylinders. We have to begin to posture, shoulders roll back, tension rises up into the chest. We have to kind of present ourselves as something, and we become shallow breathers. And so we're not giving our body the registration what it is. And we transition from a sensing being to a mind-driven being. We're kind of trying to constantly now assess and figure out and look and can I be that person? Do I need to be around that person? Right. And everything now starts all upstairs. And that's why we lose that sense of sensation driven capacity. And so the first 2 weeks usually is really nothing more than just a simple return to breath. And it gives the mind and body what it needs. So mind needs control. Guy upstairs, it needs to be in control. And so when you are focused on your in-breath in through your nose and putting that breath where you want it and kind of holding it early on just to engage those muscles, because they're deadened. Some people really have a hard time doing this, right up front. But really, truly deep down into the belly, shoulders relax, chest relax, back relax, should have no movement from chest up, really. Deep into the body. Now I'm going to give the body what it needs, which is to give up control. And I'm simply going to open my mouth, relax my jaw, and I'm going to allow breath to naturally leave the system.
So not forcing.
Nope. Yeah. Not at its pace, at its time. And you will find, some people sit there and nothing's coming out because the body doesn't know how to do it. And they'll have to kind of give it a little force and retract the diaphragm gently to kind of begin to push that air out. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to me, right? And then I do that, and I tell people 3 to 5 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a day. Give me a very distinct pattern, focus pattern in the morning. Keep your eyes open because it's a presencing practice.
That's an important detail, because a lot of people think close your eyes.
Nope. I mean, if you need to concentrate on the in-breath, make sure your eyes are open on the out-breath, because what's happening is triggering the vagal nerve. You're sending signals of safety to the brain. You're now in observation. You're looking around, and the whole system is registering, I'm okay. I'm safe. And if you're up in posture, so the first 5 minutes of the day, you can sit. I don't care if you want to do it drinking your coffee. I don't give a shit how you want to do it. Just do it. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I just let's take the boundaries. Let's take the way you're supposed to do things.
Yes.
But fundamentally to sit in structural alignment, right? To sit in alignment, maybe up on the chair, or if you want to do a cushion or whatever it is you feel like doing, totally fine. But you got to train the system. It's like anything else. So give me those 2 anchor points at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day for 5 minutes of just that breath. And, if you got to kind of give it a little support at fine, totally okay. If it feels a little weird, you're not really sure, it'll take a few minutes for this to kind of relax. You put your hands up on your chest if you want to try to keep it in control, but just work that pattern and just be diligent about it. No judgment, just be diligent about it. Control on the way in, put it where you want it. Give control on the way out. Allow the breath to leave the body as it wants to. You'll actually feel yourself kind of wobble a little bit and settle in, and you're observing whatever's happening in the present moment. Maybe a squirrel running by, maybe the wind blowing, maybe snow falling, whatever it is, right? You're just connected to now. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening of that, or, even 3 if you can't really get full 5 in. And then I often say, set a timer and give me 3 to 5 minutes in the course of life. Now, for the first week, it's going to be a little bit disruptive because you got to kind of bring your concentration to it. But what you will find over time is the body will start to pick that breath up. And usually it takes about 2 weeks for it to re-register in the system. And then it starts to feel more natural. You still will have to bring your mind back to it. But after, 4 weeks-ish or so, just a little nudge to it, you will find yourself breathing that way naturally. And then you will notice more when you are breathing shallow than when you are breathing correctly. What that's doing fundamentally is re-anchoring the system, retraining the elephant to what's familiar. And then over time, and this is kind of the anchored human and process of things, we get to sensation awareness, we get to sensation identification, sensation management, energy awareness, energy management, right? We kind of walk you down the path of, over about 90 days, how to re-anchor the elephant into being capable. Because here's the other thing about safety, and I want to make this one clear. For 99% of us out there, safety is an external resourcing. We put the determination of, am I safe, externally. The only person that can define safety for you is you.
Yes.
That's it. And so if you don't know what safe feels like for you, if you do not have that anchor to return to then assess, can I, or against somebody else, when we're talking about, when we step away from physical safety for a minute, one, right? If the sensations are coming at you and you don't feel physically safe, you're not physically safe. The body is giving you a massive favor. Listen to it, please, period. Okay. In every moment and in every time. If something is, take it from the guy who is still alive today. If something in the environment is saying you're not physically safe, just go, I'm not physically safe, and find the exit, period. End of sentence. Because better safe than sorry, right? Always. When it comes to emotional safety, when it comes to spiritual safety, all the other mental safety, right? Can I express this or say this? That's a you determination against the conditions. And so, but really at the end of the day, I never put my anchor of safety externally on anyone else, ever. And so finding that discovery and knowing that I am safe right here, right now. Yes, I'm safe to say this. Who on this podcast is going to be like, just, and if they do, oh, well, you know what I mean? I got nothing for you. This is just shit I've learned.
Okay. I would love for you to share this with the audience because, I understand the power of breath work, and I know quite a few people in my audience are going to understand the power of breath work.
Sure.
But perhaps for someone who doesn't truly understand the power behind what seems like a very simple exercise.
Yeah.
Explain how some of your people that you've worked with, your clients and all of that, what has happened as a result? What are they experiencing once they start to discover or re-establish that anchor of safety through that breath exercise?
Yeah. Here's the results that generally come up, right? You are radically clear, right? You just are, right? The level of observation of what is happening right now in this present moment, because that's where, it's often described, right? Spinal cord brainstem, recording very reactionary device. That's what's holding all our sensation-based stuff. Limbic cluster, that's our real-time operating machine. That's constantly, it's the invisible radar in the world, looking for something to ping the system. And then upstairs, right, our neocortex, our new brain, I like to say, is nothing more than a time machine. Gives us the opportunity to think about the past or think about the future and bounce those back and forth. So in the particular breathwork we're talking about, what it does is it drops you out of the neocortex. It keeps you more hyper present. into the current present moment, and you have a greater level of current clarity, is what I like to call it, right? So it's, you are more real time right now. You are noticing things more. And what does that do for you? If I walk in the door after a bad day and I'm, in the past at work or wherever I was that was frustrating or something going on, how much clarity am I going to have to meet my partner or my person or my friend or whoever it is walking through the door? I'm not, right? And so I want to be able to be capable of being there and present and here, because I'm a fundamental believer that the environment will give you the cues of the action to take if you're there for them. So that's kind of one more theory-based, right, result, right? I mean, that's kind of something you have to experience to really be like, oh, I get that. I think when you start to get into tangible experiences, you're talking to people that I've trained out in the world, it keeps you alive, right? I mean, you're absolutely present in a moment, able to connect and understand. And then, the people that come after, that are CEOs. I had a guy who, a client, it's funny, in the very first session, we get down to it, and his bottom line buzz in the body, he believed at like age 4 that his parents were driving around at night looking for a place to drop him off. They argued. He knew that he was an accident. They didn't want him around. And the sensation lodged in his body at 4 was, I'm about to get dropped off somewhere.
Wow.
Now, whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. But that's his sensation. He owns that. So it is real. Whether it's true or not, it's real for him. And of course, that guy grows up to be an extremely top performing individual. He's running his 3rd publicly traded company, of course, right? That's the magic, because in a publicly traded company, what's the deal? You can be fired. You can be dropped off at any moment in time. Stock prices drop. Somebody writes a bad article. Board comes together. You're fired. So he has created the exact conditions for himself to exercise everything he had to do to compensate for that moment in time. Now, 90 days in with me, and he actually, it was faster than that. It was about a month and a half in. Like he had told me, he goes, I've never been able to make it through a board meeting without being drenched in sweat. And went through a board meeting, no sweat, no nothing, and a fairly powerful company. One of the former commanders of Naval Special Warfare, Admiral, is on the board, said, hey, will you stay after for me, please? I want to talk to you for a second. He stayed after, and he said, listen, sir, I've seen a lot of briefings. I've been in a lot of meetings over the course of my life. I want you to know, absolutely one of the most powerful meetings I've ever attended in my entire life. And so what does that do, right? That becomes validation. That becomes a solidification for re-anchoring of the elephant, that I no longer need to operate from that embedded sensation that can actually dissipate out of the system. And I'm creating a new anchor for me to be successful. Does that make sense? Does that help?
No, it really does. And I think that's it's a great analogy, or even, I should not say even analogy, but an example of how our younger years literally create the blueprint for our adult life.
Well, and half the time we're going and looking for answers. Why this, that? Why am I like this? What did they do to me? And I'm not worried about blame or anything else. Like, figure it out, regardless of what happened. This is the fundamental problem I have kind of when we're doing inner child work, when we're going back and looking at childhood. You kind of have to go in, one, with a lot of grace, right? To look for yourself and for the people around you, because I would say most times mom and dad were just doing the best they could with the tools and things that, like, I say it all my time. My dad had no chance of being a dad. Like, he did better than his. Like radically better than his, but still had no chance at really being a dad. And, I've tried to do radically better than him. And hopefully little man will try to do radically better than me. Right. And so that's the breakage that goes. But regardless, I'm able to take on and say, okay, whether that thing happened or not, that's what's in my system. And now it's my responsibility to navigate that or do something with that if I want to see change. Doesn't matter what really happened. Doesn't. actually anymore.
Nope.
And more likely we'll never get that story, right? Because it versioned out for everybody in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when you can give that up a little bit and just start to say, okay, these are the things that are registered in my system. I believe this is what may have happened or may have gone on, or this was my view of what was going on at the time, or this is the sensation that now comes up that I'm interpreting as that. Great. Cool. Yes. And who knows? And it doesn't matter because that's the sensation in your body that we have to begin to re-anchor into something different or dissipate or enable to let go of. And so I think part of the time it is our process to kind of harbor blame or resentment or anger or whatever else at someone that did this thing. Regardless, that thing created something. I don't want that anymore. So now how do I express that?
One of the things that when I do inner child work with my clients is one of the first hurdles we have to get over is the resistance to demonizing the parents. Mm-hmm. And I said, this isn't about, when we talk about the experiences of what you had as a child, it is not about turning your parents into the bad guy. This is about honoring the experience you had as a child, mm-hmm. whether what you experienced as a child is the truth of what actually happened with your parents or not. It is your experience. And although consciously as an adult today, you can look back and say, oh yeah, the reason why my dad didn't spend so much time with me is because he had to work, like 2 jobs mm-hmm. just to put food on the table for my family. And that was one of the sacrifices we had just so that we were okay. But the child needed to have dad around in order to, function properly and create a proper relationship with male in his life. Yep. And so, we need to go back to that experience and understand what that is without worrying about. And it's such a hurdle. It's such a hurdle to have to get past.
You could have lost your teddy bear at 3 and be a hoarder today.
I know.
Right? I mean, like you can't apply logic and reasoning to why am I this because of that? Like there's so much in there. And so I think overall, the less attachment we have to what and the more recognition we have as regardless of what, this was what I experienced in the moment and the sensation that got lodged in the system. And that's what I want to deal with mm-hmm. because I don't want it anymore. Or I can kind of reframe that to be of value that heightens my awareness, that does keep me safe, right? That does begin to, it's partly why I love like IFS therapy, the internal family systems model, where you're able to kind of look at parts, mature those parts up to where you are today, and unburden those parts in a way of not getting rid of them, but giving them a new job. So it's like, okay, this is what started with little Jeff to keep me safe, or, that's what I created to keep me safe. That stayed, in the maturity level of little Jeff. And that's why Jeff acts like a kid sometimes mm-hmm. today. Well, let's bring that part up to now. And instead of trying to get rid of it, what do you want to do now? Like, what's your new role? How do you want to keep me safe today? Like, I'm a grown man. I'm pretty physically capable of a lot of things. Like, I have all this experience behind me now. So I don't need you to do what you did when I was 3, 4, 5, 6. What do you want to do today? And, sometimes it's been like, rest. I would like to rest. Cool. Then let's let you be in control of my rest. Let's give you the job of pinging my buzzer when it's time for me to rest. Would you like to do that? Absolutely. Cool. You know what I mean? And so like, that's what I love about that work. And it's not external, right? It's just able to.
So internal.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, this has been fascinating. I thank you so much for coming on the show and discussing like everything. And I can't wait for your book to come out, The Anchored Human. Let my audience know where they can find you, connect with you, and what you've got coming up late as of late.
Yeah. So, absolutely. Probably the easiest way, because I like to keep things simple. So really my Instagram is my primary thing, and that's Mindset06Actual. There is Mindset Radio on Instagram you can follow as well. And as we're about to relaunch the show, there'll be a lot more content there, mindsetradio.com. And then from there, you can navigate in. And if you want to like look at what the Anchored Human is going to be about, you can go to mindsetradio.com/anchoredhuman. You can also check out mindsetradio.com/finding zero, which is kind of the advanced way of actually doing a central nervous system reset. I'm bringing in a group of people now to kind of test methodologies and et cetera over the next 6 months or so, to make sure that we can scale that well. So that's kind of an exciting little fun project going on right now, case study wise. So if anybody wants to throw the ring in the hat and play with me for, a period of time, you're more than welcome. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. If you Google my name, you'll find me. I'm out there. But mostly kind of day in and day out, most people follow me on Mindset 06 Actual, and then, follow Mindset Radio for a couple extra goodies. And that's just it. I mean, I like to keep it simple these days, not complexify everything, right?
Well, social media doesn't want to keep things simple.
No, I mean, I'm sure there'll be a TikTok crap at some point and everything else, but it's just the way it goes. So,
well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you to my audience for tuning in every week and supporting me in the show. I appreciate you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review on Apple or Spotify. It'll help the show greatly. And please share this episode with someone who's maybe going through something. I mean, we're all going through this idea of rediscovering our true anchor of safety. We just went through 2 years where everyone's anchor of safety was exposed, that no one is actually feeling safe. So please share this episode with anyone that you know. And I love you guys so much. And I'll be back with you next week. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.